Welcome to History on Repeat, a podcast that delves into the fascinating stories and mysteries of the past. I'm your host, Jackie Sharp, author of the Carroll and Delaney historical mystery series set in 1940s London. As a writer, I'm constantly researching and uncovering intriguing tales from history that inspire my novels. In each episode of this podcast, we'll explore a captivating historical event, figure, or phenomenon that echoes through time and shapes our understanding of the present. From the foggy streets of post-war London to the hidden corners of history, join me on a journey of discovery as we unravel secrets, debunk myths, and shed light on the enduring mysteries of yesteryear. Whether you're a history buff, a fan of my Carroll and Delaney mysteries, or simply someone who loves a good story, this podcast is for you. So let's turn back the clock and immerse ourselves in the twists and turns of history. The end of World War II was, in some respects, as much as an upheaval and period of change to many UK households as wartime itself. For 6 years, the majority of the male population had been away, fighting the war, leaving wives and children behind, to keep the home fires burning, to quote the popular phrase. In my novels, Maggie Carroll, the main protagonist, is the wife left behind while George, her husband, is enlisted. She has 3 children, a daughter who is just about an adult and 2 young boys. Bernadette, Maggie's daughter, works in the munitions factory, the Woolwich Arsenal. When the war ends, Bernadette is laid off to make way for the returning men who will need jobs. During the war, many women had taken on the role of the primary earner while their husbands were away fighting. This experience of independence and financial responsibility gave women a new sense of confidence and autonomy. However, when the war ended and men returned home, there was a societal expectation for women to return to their traditional roles as housewives and mothers. This shift back towards traditional gender roles created tensions within some families. Women who had enjoyed the sense of purpose and fulfillment in their wartime work often struggled with the loss of their independence and the limitations placed on their aspirations. Some women felt pressured to prioritize their domestic duties over their own desires for personal and professional growth. For men, the return to civilian life and the workforce also posed challenges. Some men struggled with the psychological effects of war and found it difficult to readjust to family life. The expectation to be the sole breadwinner could create financial pressures and strain relationships, particularly in cases where men faced unemployment or underemployment in the post-war economy. The post-war period also saw a shift in family dynamics, with a greater emphasis on the nuclear family unit, the rise of suburban living, and the baby boom of the late 1940s and 1950s reinforced the idea of the traditional family structure, with the father as the primary earner and the mother as the primary caregiver. This model was further reinforced by media messaging and societal expectations, which often portrayed the ideal family as one with clearly defined gender roles. However, the reality of post-war life did not always match these idealized representations. Many families faced financial struggles, and women often had to balance their domestic responsibilities with the need to contribute to the household income. The pressure to conform to traditional gender roles could create tensions and resentments within families, particularly for women who felt limited in their options and opportunities. And what about those families who had lost men in the fighting? Women who had lost their husbands during World War II faced unique challenges and societal attitudes in the post-war period. The war had left many women as widows, often with young children to support on their own. These single-parent families faced both practical difficulties and social stigma in a society that still strongly favoured traditional family structures. In the immediate post-war years, the UK government provided some support for war widows through the War Widows Pension Scheme. This pension aimed to help women who had lost their husbands in service to the country, recognising their sacrifice and the financial hardship they faced. However, the pension was often insufficient to cover the full costs of raising a family, and many widows had to seek employment to make ends meet. For women who had lost their husbands and were now single mothers, the expectation to prioritise their domestic roles and childcare responsibilities could be particularly challenging. Society still largely viewed the ideal family structure as one with a male breadwinner and a female homemaker, and single mothers often faced judgment and stigma for not conforming to this norm. The attitude towards single mothers varied, but it was not uncommon for them to be seen as a burden on society or as a moral failing. Some people viewed single motherhood as a sign of promiscuity or irresponsibility, rather than recognizing the circumstances that had led to their situation. This stigma could make it difficult for single mothers to access support and resources, both from the government and from their communities. Despite these challenges, many war widows and single mothers showed remarkable resilience and determination in the face of adversity. They often relied on networks of support from family, friends, and other women in similar situations. Some women formed organisations and support groups specifically for war widows, providing a space for shared experiences and mutual aid. Media portrayals played a significant role in shaping attitudes towards single mothers and women's roles in the post-war period in the United Kingdom. The media, including newspapers, magazines, radio, and the emerging medium of television, had the power to influence public perceptions and reinforce societal norms. In the immediate post-war years, media representations of women often emphasised their traditional roles as wives, mothers, and homemakers. Women's magazines, such as Woman's Own and Good Housekeeping, frequently featured articles and advertisements that idealised the domestic sphere and the role of women in creating a happy and harmonious home life. These portrayals reinforced the idea that a woman's primary purpose was to support her husband and children, and that fulfillment could be found in the domestic realm. At the same time, media coverage of single mothers tended to be limited and often judgmental. When single mothers were portrayed, it was often in the context of scandal, moral failing, or social problem. Newspaper articles and editorials sometimes depicted single mothers as a burden on society or a threat to the traditional family structure. These negative portrayals reinforced the stigma and discrimination that single mothers faced in their daily lives. However, the post-war period also saw the emergence of some media voices that challenged traditional gender roles and advocated for greater equality and support for women. And it was no doubt that women's wartime efforts had definitely challenged the traditional views of female roles, and the post-war period saw the beginnings of women's liberation efforts and feminism, which would blossom in the coming decades.